Hello and welcome to Small Business Snippets, the podcast from smallbusiness.co.uk. I'm your host, Anna Jordan. Today we have Jenny Campbell, businesswoman, speaker, investor and former dragon. Rather than going down the traditional education route, Jenny left school at 16 to become a cash counter and cash point filler. She worked her way up in the banking world, and by the age of 23 she earned her banking qualifications and a Chartered Institute of Bankers prize. Her first taste of running a business was when she bought RBS-owned cash machine firm Hanco, which she rebranded as Your Cash Europe. At the time, Hanco had expanded too quickly and was making a loss. The company underwent a major operational restructure overseen by Jenny. In 2016, she sold the business for 50 million. During her time on Dragon's Den, Jenny invested in companies including Didsbury Gin, Look After My Bills, Driven Media and Karen UK. She is the Vice Chair of the Prince's Trust Enterprise Fellowship Programme and supports the Young Enterprise and the New Entrepreneurs Foundation. She's also a dog breeder and an accredited breed judge. Hi, Jenny.
Hi, good morning.
Hi, how are you doing?
I'm really good, thank you, really good.
Great. Okay, so let's get cracking. First off, one of your mantras is to live by corporate standards but breathe like an entrepreneur. Tell us more about what you mean by that.
Yeah, that really came out of my time when I was taking over the cash machine business, then owned by RBS, and found the business to have got enormous growing pains. When it was incorporated in 2000 and then sold to RBS in 2004, it had grown enormously fast and it did have a very impressive customer and asset base, but it had grown up on very simple, if any, policies, procedures, people, codes of conduct, etc. So the business I went to in 2006 was in quite a lot of chaos, to be honest. But I found that all the skills I'd learned over my banking career, which you don't really appreciate at the time, but I could apply them to this business, particularly around change management, turnaround scenarios, risk management, and so on, and process mapping, all those good corporate things. I could apply them to this business. And that's what got me through the first 2 years in getting the business sort of shipshape, really. It was losing a lot of money at the time. And by the time we got 2 or 3 years down the path, it was breaking even. And then that led into, the management buyout. But on reflection then, when it came to selling the business, before that even became a management team buyout, when we were looking to sell the business, I said to RBS, look, you've helped to put the corporate procedures into this business, but it now needs to have its entrepreneurial wings in order for it to be nimble and compete against its competitors in the UK. It was important for a business of that size to have corporate standards, but it also then needed to be nimble in terms of decision making and innovation and product development, which we weren't at that stage by still being part of a bank, due to how bureaucratic that can be within a big corporate.
So how do you introduce entrepreneurial wings, so to speak?
Start with the people. One of my big transformations in the business was around the people, the quality of the people, the culture of the people. So I turned over a lot of people in the early days, those that didn't, in my view, have the right skills or attitude to drive the business forward. Created a real people culture in the business. Work hard, play hard. Lots of rewards for delivering performance. Lots of fun as well. So that and the ability for them, for the staff to feel that they had their own initiative to drive the business forward. You could always put your hand up and suggest this, or just get on with doing things. And, if mistakes were made, you didn't get berated for that. It was just, get up, you've graced your knees, we move on. So it was a real can do, will do, want to attitude in the business. And we lived and breathed it from the top and right the way down.
One of the things on your time on Dragon's Den, so it was perhaps a little clearer that you had come from this corporate background, moved up in the banking world, as opposed to starting up a business from scratch, perhaps like some of the other dragons and the business owners coming in. What do you feel your experience brought to the table as opposed to some of the other dragons who had indeed started up their own businesses from nothing?
Yeah. I think I came to pure entrepreneurship myself later in my career, if you like, when I went to Hanco, which then became Your Cash. So I was into my mid-40s by then. But as I reflected on how I turned from corporate career to entrepreneur, Some of my reflections were one around my childhood, where my grandparents were all entrepreneurs, builders, printers, etc. in my local town. So I came from quite an entrepreneurial background. Yes, I went into a profession because that was seen in those generations as safer and more secure, and the pensions and all of that good stuff. But also I dealt with entrepreneurs more or less every day in my banking career, just on the other side of the desk, if you like. So, you know, one of my roles was as a business relationship manager. I had 200 clients out in the community, everything from farmers and builders and lorry drivers and retailers, etc. So I was working alongside those entrepreneurs all my banking career. So it just felt that I'd stepped from one side of the desk to the other, to be honest, and I had it in my DNA.
So what did you find was the biggest difference from going from one world into the other?
Freedom. Freedom, scary, exciting. You know, you realize that there's a lot rests on your shoulders. The first month after we bought the business out, you know, instead of me receiving a salary check on the 18th, I had to think about paying £250,000 worth of wages, and every month, and you feel responsible for people's homes and families and that sort of thing. So, but equally, all the freedom that comes with that, and responsibility to keep that business going and grow it.
Coming back into more Dragon's Den based, so look after my bills, in your own words, negotiated hard. What advice would you have for business owners who are looking for funding but are in that sort of position? What kind of negotiation tips would you have, and what would win you over?
I think what always wins me and many investors over is that besides investing in that business and that product, you are ultimately investing in that person or persons. Yeah. So the people standing in front of you, you know, I've got to get a rapport with them straight away, that I admire them, I believe them, you know, I'm confident that they can deliver on their proposal. So, you know, the boys, Will and Henry from Look After My Bills, did negotiate hard, but that showed me that they had the experience to do that. I admire that. One of my other entrepreneurs accepted my offer before I'd even finished making it, sort of thing. But he was much younger and much more inexperienced. So yes, Will and Henry did a great job of negotiating, and Tej and I got a very small slice of Look After My Bills, but it proved to be a great investment because they exited to go Compare 10 months later, and we got a very nice return on a very small investment.
Nice. Yes, it's interesting because I think that them not budging much on their proposition, their offer, Peter said, yeah, it shows a certain level of naivety. So it must be quite different between investors.
Yes, but that's a lot of gameplay in the negotiation, isn't it? You've all got to play. You've all got to play your own part. So yeah, there's admiration behind that hard negotiating stance as well. You've got to, as an entrepreneur, have some emotional intelligence as where the tipping point is with that investor. You can push them so far, but you've got to recognise where you're going to lose that investor, where they're just going to sign out and say, you know, I'm out.
Let's come back to raising finance in general. We're, of course, in a difficult time at the moment. This is actually the first of the remote podcast recordings that we're doing, obviously because of COVID-19. What kind of advice do you have about raising finance during particularly tough times such as this one?
Yeah, I mean, you know, is it any different during these times than you know, pre-COVID? If anything, there's more options such as bounce back loans, etc. around. So I think my advice is probably the same, which is to cover a lot of bases in looking for those options. First of all, think about what is the structure of what you're looking for. Are you able to take any debt into the business, because that'll save you giving away equity? Equally, sometimes it's a strategic thing to find an equity investor, because you get smart investors in the business who will help to propel your business further than if you were trying to do it with the existing equity structure. So it's always a balance of what the business can take, what it needs, and that strategic aspect. I mean, I'm working with one of my businesses now on doing our first fundraise. Yeah. And I'm just educating them on taking those steps really, really carefully to find the right structure of equity and debt, and crucially, the right people to come into the business. And I always say to them that this is like a snooker game. It's not just about getting the first red ball down, but it's working out how you get the black ball down, which is your exit. So every step of fundraise is so important. You must think about how that impacts the next step and your eventual exit. But I think all those usual funding routes are there. And if anything, there is pent up demand from private equity and VCs to get money invested right now.
Has COVID-19 affected the way that you invest or the companies that you would be interested in investing in right now?
I don't think it's affected the way I invest. We've all, apart from not meeting people in person, but we've all got very used to, tiled Zoom screens, etc., or Teams or Google or whatever. So we've all got used to those virtual meetings. So the way in which I invest has not changed. Maybe where I invest has changed. There's perhaps some areas you might have thought of investing in pre-COVID, but post-COVID, either they're not the right areas, or there's certainly better areas that have actually capitalized on COVID. I always say that wherever there's challenges, there's opportunities. And it's just watching which ones will, rise out of this. I mean, my Didsbury Gin business pivoted into hand sanitizer and have done a fantastic job. Now, did I think I'd ever be invested in hand sanitizer? No, but it was the right thing to do, and they've done very well.
That's it, isn't it? Because I think out of this, it's very much extremes in either that a company has either done very well or struggled quite significantly.
Yeah, but that'll be the true test of the entrepreneur on dealing with that. My eldest son has 3 restaurants in London. It's not been an easy time. However, he's probably going to come out of this leaner, fitter, stronger, and with a different strategic path, but actually a better one as well.
Yeah.
But you personally as an entrepreneur have got to have the resilience and the foresight and the vision to deal with that. And that's what the key strength of an entrepreneur is.
Yeah, and particularly going digital as well, I think has helped a lot of businesses. I mean, even ones that didn't have a website before are very quickly moving online and having to learn.
You've got to go where the consumer is going to go, which is, a huge shift to online, as you say.
So I'd like to ask a couple of questions about your views in business. I've read that your plan wasn't to become a business owner, but you sort of take things when they arise. And especially when your children were quite young, you think about the year ahead. But I suppose generally with business owners, they're advised to think like 1, 3, 5 years in advance. So what are your views when it comes to planning versus spontaneity in business?
Yeah, I mean, I always say, look, when I was 16, 18, 25, I didn't really see much further than the next year. As you get older, you start to sort of plan your runway out a bit more, I think. But it's always a balance for a business owner of never losing sight of today and the detail that you need to do of today, whilst balancing that with a vision for the future. And that's quite a tricky thing sometimes. You can be lost in the weeds on a day-to-day basis and never have that time to think about the future. But you can find different places to do that future thinking. I remember when I was busy, very, very busy in Your Cash with the turnaround work, where my vision and strategy used to come from was when I was on the running machine, in the evening in the gym or in the bath or something. I used to come back fueled with what we need to do differently. So you just need to find those spaces to let your head clear and think about the future of the business. But you must do that and not be just lost in the day-to-day. So I think, now I do plan much further ahead. Hence, it's probably actually drove my exits of Your Cash, because I'd been at the business 10 years. And, I was obviously had half an eye on where cash was going as well in the future, which has proved to be quite prophetic. And equally, I wanted at least another 10 years in business doing other things. And so focusing on the end game is quite important.
Actually, my next question was going to be about your exit plan for Your Cash. Talk us through it. Like, when did it begin? How did it unfold? Did it change?
I think, again, when you reflect on these things, I think it probably began on the day I did the management buyout in 2010. And the reason for that was that as soon as the business became independent from RBS, I straight away started getting courted by other independents to amalgamate with them. So I realized from year one, that there was an opportunity out there for a trade sale. But I knew it wasn't going to be right then for all my energy and passion into buying this business out and mortgaged my home, etc. And, I was on a journey and I was going to sell at an optimum time. So, but knowing that those courtiers were out there, I kind of played that dance with them for 5 years and eventually, reeled one of them in for an exit. So, there you can see I was planning even in 2010 to exit probably 5-6 years down the path, which is what I did. I think in any market, I've seen it in, say, the supermarket industry, etc. I always say all businesses compete on the ground, but at top level, the CEOs, etc., all meet each other in conventions and industry gatherings, etc., and all have quite a grown-up and professional relationship. So I always had those relationships with the bosses of the other businesses, and there was always, muted conversations about seeing if there's the usual words of areas of cooperation or synergies between us, etc. So there's a lot of dancing around handbags before you come to the formal marriage.
I suppose it's like networking of any kind, isn't it? You got to just build up that relationship quite slowly.
And it's important to do that. It's important to, that's a really good point. I had extensive networks across my industry, not just in the UK, but across the globe. And would take plane trips across the globe to go to certain conventions to make sure I had FaceTime with people. So I was out there and present, and had a really good, if you like, black book.
And finally, given your background with YourCash, what do you make of cash versus contactless, especially in this COVID-19 landscape? Is it still worth businesses to keep accepting cash?
Yeah. Well, before I sold the business, there was always a challenge externally around what's the future of cash. And I would say then, look, I still think cash is here for another generation in this country. It's very entrenched in this country, as it is in other countries such as Ireland and Germany. And yet, if you look at different countries like the Nordics, they've been almost cashless for a very long time. So where do we sit in all of this? I still think there is a place for cash in the UK for a while, because we don't have all the systems properly to contribute to charities and to pay for certain things, etc., and for the elderly and the disadvantaged. So all the systems are not there yet to digitally to support moving to totally non-cash. So I do think there's a place for it. And so therefore, to that end, I think it is important that the retailers will accept cash. And businesses do accept cash, because not everybody is able already to move to digital. And I think, the consumers have got to be educated and cajoled, but not forced, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's important for people in terms of budgeting, or people who may not be best able to manage their money. But do you think we will ever go completely cashless? And if so, what kind of point?
Crystal ball again.
Yeah.
I think we probably will. It depends how you actually define cashless. If you mean totally cashless, I think surely in the next 25 years we'll go cashless, I would have thought, providing all the, as I say, the systems are there to cope with that. But I mean, if you look at the young people of today, they just don't carry cash at all.
No. And
actually, I myself would have always had cash with me, and never have I used Apple Pay so much, but in the last 3 months.
Yes, exactly.
I'm much more comfortable with now.
Yeah.
So, that has forced buying habits. But equally, I doubt very much that the older generation have changed their buying habits. And equally, as I say, the disadvantaged still need to work with cash as well.
Well, I'll wrap up there unless there's anything you'd like to add.
No, thank you for letting me join your podcast. I'm delighted to come on and have a chat, and happy to do it any other time you wish.
Thank you for coming on the podcast. You can find out more about Jenny at jennybcampbell.com. You can also visit smallbusiness.co.uk for more articles on raising capital and choosing payment systems. Remember to like us on Facebook at Small Business Experts, and follow us on Twitter at Small Business UK, all lowercase. Until next time, thank you for listening.